Hi, I'm Greg Nielsen. This is a Chevy Bolt, and this is the 18. All right.
Hello, and hello, Greg.
Hello.
And happy birthday.
Thank you so much.
Yes.
40. So, quick question for you all. When was the very first electric car made?
1895.
1895. John?
I'm going to think 1905.
Okay, 1905.
20s.
Yeah,
1920s?
No, it'd be around 1900s.
1900s? Yeah, it was actually 1890. So you guys aren't too far off. It's actually, you know, they've been around a lot longer than most people think. That's the point. You know, you guys are pretty familiar with electric cars. I think all of you have sold electric cars. My crew from yesterday, 0 of them had sold an electric car ever. So that's going to make things go a little bit quicker here today with you guys. But yeah, they've been around for a long time. The technology's there. Obviously, the amount of sales that we're going to see in electric cars is just increasing exponentially. So, Nino, question for you. When do you think the 1 millionth electric car was sold in the whole world?
The 1 million?
Yep, the 1 millionth.
The 1 million. That would have been about 4 years ago.
Pretty close. Yeah, 2016. Yeah. So in 2016, in the entire world, there had been 1 million cars sold. Okay. This year, at some point this year, probably a bit later on in the fall, there are going to be 1 million electric cars sold in the world in 1 month. Okay. So that's kind of the exponential curve that we're talking about. Right. So far this year, there's been about 2 million electric cars sold. Or this was just actually the numbers I got were from March, so it was just from January to March. Right? And that was double what they were the previous year. Okay, so like 900,000 electric cars a month is kind of what's happening right now. And for sure by the end of the year, there are going to be 1 million electric cars sold around the world in 1 month. So pretty big numbers. And they're only going to get bigger. So because of that, we need to understand things a little bit differently as they relate to electric cars versus gas cars, okay? So the first thing is all of these, all this technical jargon that I've written down on this page. Now, I wrote that out yesterday while I was talking to my crew, but you know, I expect all of you guys to know what those terms are, right? You know, a kilowatt, kW. Well, a kilowatt is just a unit of power, okay? Some people confuse it with a unit of capacity, like a battery, but the truth is a battery doesn't have kilowatts, right? A lot of people don't realize this. A battery has kilowatt hours because it stores energy, okay? A kilowatt's actually a unit of power, like horsepower or torque, right? So you don't go and you didn't fill up, you didn't fill your car up with, 495 horsepower this morning, did you? You filled it up with like 80 liters of gas, right?
That's right.
So that's the difference, right? It's a kilowatt's a unit of power, a kilowatt hour is a unit of capacity. And actually, because we don't have things like horsepower and gallons and liters and stuff like that, it actually makes it a little bit easier and it makes more sense. Because 1 kilowatt is 1,000 watts, okay? That's what kilo means, is 1,000. So 1,000 watts would be like 10 100 watt light bulbs, right? You mind just put your phone away? You know? Thanks. So, and then the other thing is, to kind of make things a little bit more relatable, most microwaves, I don't know if you know this, but most microwaves are about 1,000 watts, right? That's why sometimes if you have a microwave plugged into a plug that's got a lot of other stuff plugged into it, and you turn the microwave, oops, you trip the breaker. Because microwave draws a lot of power. 1,000 watts is quite a lot of power. So 1,000 watts is 1 kilowatt, okay? Now, what's a kilowatt hour? Well, pretty straightforward. It's the ability to deliver 1,000 watts of power for 1 hour, right? So if you have 1 kilowatt hour of battery capacity, in theory, you could run a microwave for 1 hour, right? Or you could drive this car for like 10 kilometers. But because these all relate to each other, it actually makes it easier to understand and easier to figure out and calculate things like rates of charging, so charging speed, how much energy you have inside your battery, and how much energy you're consuming when you drive your electric car. It makes all this stuff way easier than having to deal with gallons and liters and horsepower and miles per gallon and all that stuff. It all relates to what you see on the window sheet of every electric car, where you see things like, you know, this car uses for 18.3 kilowatt hours for every 100 kilometers that it drives, right? I would say pretty much anybody coming in that doesn't know anything about electric cars would have no freaking clue what you're talking about if you said that. 18.3 kilowatt hours per 100 kilometers. Guess what? It's our job to know exactly what that means and understand it very clearly, okay? So let's break that number down real quick. This car uses 18.3 kilowatt hours, right? This one here, of electricity for every 100 kilometers that it drives, right? So that would be equivalent to what we're used to, which is, you know, 10.3 liters per 100 kilometers. It's the exact same sort of ratios that we're working with here. So if your gas car gets 10.3 liters per 100 kilometers, this one gets 18.3 kilowatt hours per 100 kilometers. So that's why they break it down that way. Well, what do we know about kilowatt hours? I know that the battery in this car holds about 64 kilowatt hours, right, of electricity. So, hey, divide that by the 18.3, you can figure out the total range of the car pretty easily, right?
450.
Yeah, if you're using that calculation for the kilowatt hours per 100 kilometers, that's no problem. What else? Well, you can figure out how long it would take you to charge the car to get 100 kilometers of range. So this is a really cool thing. There's no way you can do this with a gas car. Not that you really need to. That's one thing, like when you have customers coming in asking about electric cars, they're always curious to know how long it takes to charge your car. When was the last time you had a customer come and ask you how long it takes to fill their tank with gas?
Never.
Well, big diesels with the
Right? You're more concerned with how much it holds or how much it's going to cost. So because it's electric, because things are different, you're going to get different questions, and different things are more important to customers, right? So the length of time that it takes to charge. So 18.3 kilowatt hours, well, if I have a charger that gives me 18.3 kilowatts of power, right? That would take an hour to charge it, wouldn't it? I will say that 18.3 kilowatts is quite a bit, right? The charger that's built into this car here, when you plug it into one of these guys, a level 2 charger, like this, the power that's going into the battery comes from the charger in the car, right? This is just a connection to the power source. That's all this is. This isn't an actual charger. A lot of people don't realize that. The charger's in the car. So the charger that's in this car can deliver 11 kilowatts of power, right? So basic math tells me that if I plug this car in for 1 hour and I was getting 11 kilowatts of power, I wouldn't get 100 kilometers of range, would I? I would get like, yeah, 60, 70 kilometers of range, right? So this is all, if you understand what these numbers mean and how they all work together, you can explain that to a customer. You can say, well, if you plug the car in for an hour, you get about like 70 kilometers of range, right? And that's a pretty important thing for someone to know, because when they come in and they want to know about charging is, how long does it take to charge the car? Well, what they're actually asking is, how long does it take to charge the car, if you ask people specifically, from 0% to 100%? Well, that would take quite a long time, wouldn't it? We all know it's like several hours on one of these things. So communicating to people in terms of how much range you get for every hour that you're plugged in is actually a pretty good way to communicate it, right? Because then all they have to do is think about, okay, well, you know, it's true. I have a plug at home, right? I have a plug at home. I can plug in my car while I sleep. It can charge up overnight. It's going to be plugged in for at least 10 hours. So is that 10 hours enough to fully charge the car? Well, in this case, it is. Yeah. Now, so that's on a level 2 charger. That's kind of, and basically what we're saying here is that kilowatts, kilowatt hours, this is all really easy to calculate. You can also calculate cost quite easily as well, which is another major benefit of electric cars. In BC, our average cost per kilowatt hour from BC Hydro is 10 cents. Okay?
In the home or?
This is at your home, and it varies because there's like a lower rate for the first amount of electricity that you use, and then there's a higher rate if you use more electricity. So that's why I say there's an average. But on average, and again, it's a nice round number too, it's 10 cents per kilowatt hour. Okay? So 10 cents per kilowatt hour. I see here that to drive 100 kilometers, I would use 18.3 kilowatt hours. So it would cost me $1.80 to drive 100 kilometers, right?
Yeah.
And it would cost me like $6.40 to fully charge the car. Okay.
And just to add up to the level 2 charging situation when you're doing this overnight, is this correct that up to 80% it will take 11 kilowatts, but after 80 it will take less? That's why it actually slowed down.
Yeah.
So we can just divide this by.
All these numbers are averages and theoretical because the best way to explain that is that batteries don't accept a charge at the same rate throughout their charging cycle. So an empty battery you can charge up a lot quicker than a full battery. Okay, so yeah, the top 80% charge of your battery takes a lot longer. So if you've got a customer that doesn't need the full range, they don't need 400 kilometers of range, they can get 300 out of a much lower state of charge, and they'll get that range a lot quicker too, right? So that last 100 kilometers of range is just going to take a lot more time. And that's just, it is, you don't notice it as much with a level 2 charger, because level 2 chargers are already fairly slow relative to these guys, the big DC chargers. So it's going to be pretty consistent. Where you really notice the charging curve is once you step over to a high speed level 3 charger, and you're talking like anywhere from 50 kilowatts up to 350 kilowatts of power being delivered into that battery. Well, it tapers off a lot after 80%.
So you're talking about DC.
That's DC. Yeah, we're getting ahead of ourselves a little bit here. So,
do you guys know what the DC stands for? Extra point. Extra point. DC. What is that? AC and DC.
Direct current, alternating current.
Yeah, direct current.
All right, Martin.
okay, but better question: what comes out of the battery, or what's stored inside the battery? Is it DC or AC?
DC.
Correct. So AC, this is really all you need to know. Like, there's a lot of physics and crap, that we just don't really need to know.
You learned them in ninth grade.
Yeah, exactly. Physics. Alternating. All you need to know: alternating current comes out of the wall, comes out of that plug. Okay. It actually does come out of this charger too. This is alternating current coming in and going into the car. Direct current is in the battery because between here and the battery, you've got a charger that takes the alternating current and converts it to direct current and charges the battery with direct current. Okay, that's the charger that's built into the car. Now, as soon as you plug in one of these big chargers, this bypasses the charger that's in the car. This goes directly from this machine, talks to a little computer inside the car, and then goes straight into the battery. So this is actually feeding your battery direct current. It comes directly out of, like, literally this thing here, there's direct current charge coming from this, going straight into the battery. So that's the big difference between AC and DC that you guys need to know, is that typically what comes out of the wall of your house is alternating current. What's inside the battery, what's stored in there, is direct current. Pretty straightforward. But before we get on, I wanted to talk about volts and amps too. So you guys have all heard those terms, I'm sure. I'm sure you all know that a volt is measured either at 120 or 240, or up to 440 with a DC charger. But for these purposes, we're just going to stick to 120 and 240 because this is how most people are charging their cars, either on 120 volts or 240 volts. Okay, so let's start with 120 volts. That's what comes out of that wall, right? So you've got a plug. Everyone's got a plug in their house that provides them with 120 volts of power. Okay, and that plug is most likely going to be connected to a circuit breaker that maxes out at 15 amps. Okay, there's a circuit breaker somewhere in your house that plug is connected to, that if it draws more than 15 amps, the circuit closes and you lose power. So that's why on the bolt here, we can only draw up to 12 amps, that's the maximum. Okay, you have the option of scaling it back to 8 amps. And that would be for a situation if you know you have other stuff plugged into your circuit and you just want to make sure you don't blow the circuit breaker by, you know, taking too much of a charge on the bolt. But ideally, you're going to have a plug. If you have a level 1 charging setup and that's what you're relying on, you're going to want to have nothing else plugged into that circuit so that you can use 12 amps. And then, where's my phone? So the cool thing about volts and amps is this is actually how you get this number. Okay? So a kilowatt is actually, you know, it's 1,000 watts, right? But all that is, it's like volts multiplied by amps, right? So we know we can draw 12 amps, and we know we're running it on 120 volts, so you can literally just take out a calculator and go 120 times, yeah, exactly, it's 1,440 watts, right? So, and remember, we're talking kilowatts, so 1,440 watts is 1.4 kilowatts, right? So that's where you can take this number and draw back here, and you're saying, okay, if I plug my car into that plug for 1 hour, I'm going to get 1.4 kilowatt hours of electricity. And then you can say, well, you can figure the range, right? How long it'll take me to get 100 kilometers. You could figure in, you know, 10 hours. If I plug this car in overnight for 10 hours on a level, keep in mind, this is just level 1. This is like the slowest charge you could possibly get. Yeah, you'll get 14 kilowatt hours, right? And we know 14 kilowatt hours, well, if this car burns 18.3 for 100 kilometers, then 14 is probably going to be right around 70, right? So if you've got a customer who drives 70 kilometers a day or less, guess what? A level 1 charger actually will work perfectly fine for them, because when they plug their car in at night, the next morning they get up, they'll have recuperated all of the energy that they burned the previous day. So level 2 chargers are ideal. They charge the car a lot quicker, because a level 1 charger, if you carry on that math and you say, oh, well, how long would it take to fully charge this car? Well, on a level 1 charger, that's like 50 hours, right? I don't think we're doing anyone a great service by, if someone walks in and they say, how long does it take to charge that electric car on that plug there? And you say, 50 hours, right? Without any context and explaining to them exactly, you know, how it actually works. The way I think of it, it's like, okay, sure, it would, you're right, it would take 50 hours to charge your car up on a level 1 plug. But no one's going to do that, right? It's from 0 to 100%. If you really needed to do that on a regular basis, you'd have one of these things installed in your home. But what people really need to think about is how different it is from using a gas car. Well, I don't have a gas pump at my home, right? My car doesn't sit there connected to a gas pump all night filling up with gas. So, but that's what you do get with an electric car. Right? In the morning, if you plug in your car, chances are in the morning when you go to unplug it, you've got a full tank of gas, right? So you have much better access to the fuel that your car is using than you would on a gas car. So it's a whole shift in how you perceive the consumption of the power, right? So it's better, I think, on a level 1 charger, if that's what someone's using, to talk about how long or how much range you would get when you plug in for a certain amount of time. And I think the nice easy math for us to use and communicate is to say, hey, if you plug your car in for 10 hours onto a level 1 charger, you get around 70 kilometers of range, right? Now, if that's not enough for people, then the next level is level 2. You can do the same math here. A level 2 charger comes in different sizes, and that's the cool thing about level 2 chargers. They're pretty flexible. So a lot of people have, you know, older homes, and the electrical system can't handle a lot of extra power, but they still want to install a level 2 charger. Well, you could install one with as little as 16 amps of power, right? So if you've got an older, and this is something that an electrician would get into with your customer, but if you've got an older panel and there's not much room in it, if they can squeeze out 16 amps from that panel, you can install a 16 amp level 2 charger on a 20 amp breaker. And then, you know, it's still better than plugging into level 1, because 16 amps at 240 volts, do my quick math here real quick.
30.
You're better than me. 16 times, what did I say, 240? So, so you're getting 3,800 watts, right? So you've already more than doubled how much range you're getting, right? Versus a 120. And that's kind of at the low end of these level 2 charging stations, okay? Typically they're 32 amps, like that green one over there is a 32 amp charging station. So you can do the math on that one too. 32 amps times 240 volts gives you how many kilowatts of power. These things go up to, keep in mind, the Bolt maxes out at 11 kilowatts, right? So you could plug it into an 80 amp charger, right? But if you do the math, that's way more than 11 kilowatts. This car is only going to max, it'll give you 11. That's the most it'll give you. There are other cars in the market that might benefit from a really high power charger. But that's kind of the basic math, and it's nice to know that you can do it easily. Once you understand, once you wrap your head around what this means, what that means, and what this means, then you can actually sit down and do that math with your customer. It's actually pretty simple, right? There's nothing too complicated about this. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them now, or if something comes up later, you can ask me later. Do you guys have any questions so far? Okay. We already talked about DC and AC. All we really need to know is DC is what's in your battery, AC is what comes out of the wall, okay? DC runs everything in the car. So even your power windows and your headlights, they run on DC, but they run on a lower voltage DC, the 12 volt battery, okay? So we don't need to get into that. J1772, I just wanted to put that down because some people might, keep in mind, all this stuff is kind of like jargon, and you don't necessarily want to bring up a lot of jargon with your customers unless they're clearly kind of knowledgeable about it. And I think what you will find is more and more customers are going to be more and more knowledgeable. There's a lot of people that are doing a lot of research about this. So you might have someone coming in and say, oh, does that just plug into the J1772? Right? And if you look like you're from outer space, then that might throw a red flag for them. But a J1772, all it is just a universal standard that you would use to plug in your electric car. That plug there, that's a J1772. Okay? So it's a universal standard. Our cars plug into it for level 1 and level 2 charging. And every other electric car, except for Tesla, also uses a J1772 for level 1 and level 2 charging. Okay? So that's all you need to know about that. By the way, Teslas have an adapter, so they can plug into those. They just have a little adapter that you plug in, and it goes in there.
And what kind of cable comes with the Bolt in terms of charging?
Yeah, so you actually, on an EUV, like this car right in front of us, you have the option to go either level 1 or level 2 with a system like this. So I pull it out of the car here. And actually, this is why I wrote down, right at the very bottom of my sheet, I said Nema. These, like 1450, 550, these are codes kind of similar to how this is a code for a universal standard. So there's universal standards for electricity, And Nema 1450 is this. This is a dryer plug. For most people, it's a dryer plug at least. For us, it's an opportunity to charge an electric car at up to 32 amps. So that would plug into the wall, into the dryer plug. Obviously, this is just a little box to convert things and handle the power. And then on the other end, you've got your J1772 that plugs into the car. So that's how you charge a Bolt on level 2 charging.
The standard person's household outlet, like a dryer plug, that's I guess 240, right?
Yes.
How many would that run on 32 amps? Do you know? Like what like the standard household one? How many amps it would have?
Yeah, actually, Nema. So this is Nema 1450, and actually stands for the maximum current that it can take. Oh, dead battery. Whatever. So fine. So this will go up to 50 amps.
Yeah, that one. The normal.
The actual outlet itself, it's probably connected to a 50 amp breaker.
Yeah.
That's pretty typical.
Yeah.
And then you don't want to go over 40.
Right.
So 40 amps. Yeah, like I think I said 32, but 40 amps would kind of be where this would max out. All right. Now the cool thing about the EUV is you have options. So that pops out just like that.
That was a cool sound.
And this pops in, right? Now all of a sudden, if I don't have that plug, that dryer plug, at least I can plug into a regular outlet and at least I can get 120 volts, right? So that's the reason for this little box. This will convert between 120 or 240.
Nice.
Okay.
That's only available on the EUV.
Right now, this comes with the EUV.
It's a standard.
You can order it as an option for the
It's
EV.
$399. What's that?
Can you not order that as an option
I think
for
it will.
EV?
I think it will come, but
I think eventually,
last
yeah.
week it wasn't.
Right. It's just like it's hard to get.
But question being, it would work on an EV.
Yes, absolutely. I could take this out right now, pop that plug onto the end of it, plug it in. I could plug, because really, this is what matters when you're plugging it into the car. You could take this and you could plug it into a Hyundai Kona if you wanted to. That doesn't matter. And the reason for that is because of this universal standard. That's the J1772. Works on any electric car. Okay?
And just FYI, as of end of April, none of the Teslas are coming with their portable charging cable. It is optional to get them. You have to pay for them.
And then the other two things are CCS. So now I think like we've got a pretty good understanding of household electricity. So this is what we're talking about here is the electricity that goes through everybody's house. Everybody has 120 volts and 240 volts. Every house give you 240 volts. Not everybody actually uses it, but it's there. It comes from BC Hydro. Okay? That's all household stuff. That's what you pay your 10 cents per kilowatt hour for. Now, moving on to fast charging. So that's DC. So that's, when we're talking about fast charging, this is not something that you have in your house. This is only available on what's called like 3-phase power. It's over 400 volts. And this is the type of electricity that only comes into industrial and commercial buildings. So you don't have, there's no way that someone could install one of these in their home. But we do have them here because of the type of electricity that we get in this building. And they have them like in very convenient places on the road, you know, on the side of the road, places where, you know, if you're driving long distances, you can stop for half an hour and plug into one of these and charge your car very, very quickly. Now, how quickly is based on the number of kilowatts that this thing can provide to your car and the number of kilowatts that your car can accept. There's two things going on there. They talk to each other. The newest and fastest version of a DC fast charger out there